Welcome to Precious Testimonies. I'm Kathleen Rasmussen, and I'll be your hostess for today with this broadcast, along with my husband Norm. He'll be coming on a little bit later. And Precious Testimonies is a broadcast that is designed to bring you, the listener, hope, encouragement, and insight into the things of God for your life. And it's also based on the scriptures of Psalm 96, verse 3, which says to declare God's glory among the nations. And that's exactly what this ministry, Precious Testimonies, is all about. That is what we try to do, what we are doing. We declare God's glory among the nations, and through all of these testimonies. And today we have a very special brother in the Lord who will be sharing with us about what God has done for him, how he's helped him throughout his life. And we just encourage you to sit back and listen and to see maybe God has something for you that he may be sharing. Don't close your heart. Don't close it, but listen. Because there just may be something God has that he wants you to hear. And with that, right now, I want to introduce to you Mr. WALMA. And he will be coming on very shortly here, and he will be sharing with you. Thank you. God bless you.
Hi, my name is WALMA, and I thought I'd give an affirmative, a yes, to Norm when he asked me to share my testimony. I was brought up, I'm 52 years old right now, and I was brought up as a preacher's kid. In the denomination that my dad was a pastor of, we moved every 3-4 years. And so as a child, my relationships with other people were very, very short-term. The churches that my dad pastored were quite often very difficult. He felt called of the Lord to pastor troubled churches, so he knew there was trouble waiting when he took a call. So I have 3 brothers. One was born in Texas and 2 in North Dakota, and so our life began. Now my dad had us going to church every time the doors were open. We had to go to every church function, whether it's prayer meeting, Sunday school, every church service. He preached twice a Sunday, so every time the doors were open, we had to be in it. And I got to where I resented going to church. My folks also paid to send me to Christian school, and very often the schools that were in our town were only public, and so I had to go to other towns to go to for Christian education. So I remember when we were in Minnesota, I had to go to another town which was maybe 15-20 miles away just to go to the 7th and 8th grade. Well, as a result of going to schools that were not in my town, I never really fit in, because to the schools I went to, they felt, well, I'm an outsider. I belong at a different school, as well as the public schools. People in our town, and they felt that my folks thought I was too good to go to their public school. So I was just really kind of isolated all the way around. And so I felt very, very angry and bitter and lonely and hurt. And when we went to high school the same way, I went to high school 100 miles away from my home. And that was when we lived in Iowa. And I went to Pella, Iowa, which is probably a real good school, but I always felt like an outsider. Never really felt like I belonged. Couple that with having to go to church all the time and hearing my folks talk about the problems that they were dealing with in the churches, I really hated to go to church. I thought that churches were pretty much filled with phonies, that the people act very unchristian. Now, sure, there were some good people along the way, but I heard mostly about the tough ones, the difficult ones. Also, being a preacher's kid, we grew up very poor. Never could buy new clothes. Always had to buy what was on sale or used or whatever. And so we never had any money. Also, my dad was so involved with the church that he was gone all the time, and he was always busy ministering to other people. He was so tied up with the church that I felt that the church robbed me of a father. And so when I graduated from high school, I hated church. I hated church people. And I was just resented everything. So when I moved out of the house, I moved to Grand Rapids. And because there's nothing with no solid moorings, I just lived for myself. I was very, very, very selfish. I didn't care about anyone else because I didn't think anyone else cared about me. So I just lived for myself and very extremely selfish. From graduating from high school, moving here, it wasn't long, and I was doing a lot of drinking. I ended up getting married. I hated and resented my wife. First 2 years I was married, and she came from a church family too that was also poor, and that one of her reasons of wanting to be married was to get out of the house. And so here we had a very selfish man and very insecure, selfish woman, and they got married. Wasn't married more than a few months, if even that, and I was running out on my wife already. I had a motorcycle, run with a motorcycle club, and it seemed like the theme of just about everyone there was wine, women, and songs. A lot of drinking, a lot of women, a lot of partying, and that was pretty much my life for the first 2 years of marriage. And something happened. There was one day, in fact it was on a Tuesday, that there was 3 of us riding motorcycle, and we were out town. It was close to Marne, and there was 2 of us that were riding double, and one guy was riding single. We all had big Harley Davidsons, full dressers, some of the nicest bikes of that day. And we were out in a country road, and we started racing. The fellow who was riding single was quite a ways ahead of us, and the 2 of us were riding double. We started to race, and here I was on the inside, and we were doing about 100 miles an hour. And we were coming upon the guy who was riding single, rapidly, and so I just normally pulled out and to go around him. Wrong. There was a car coming. There's only a 2-lane road, and a car coming right at me, so I instantly had to get right back to where I was riding side by side with the other fella, and there was no way we could slow down. He was doing about 60, and we were still doing about 100. And just it was incredible. The fellow who was next to me let up on the gas, and I did something that was absolutely insane. I opened up my gas, and I literally went between the 2 cycles with just inches. from both sides, still doing about 80. Which means that just a hair of difference, and we would have had 5 people and 3 motorcycles. 5 people would have been dead. We were still doing 80 or better. And so we were so shook up that we all went to the bar and had to have a few drinks. Well, the next Sunday, I just happened to call my dad, and I think he was still in Austinville, Iowa, and he knew our marriage was not doing very well. Didn't know a lot of details, and didn't really want him to know either. But in our conversation, just talking, hi, how you doing, general conversation, he told me something. He says, I don't know what was going on, but last Tuesday at about 10 o'clock, he was having breakfast with some of his preacher friends in town in a restaurant, and he said they felt an urgency to pray for me. And a cold chill went up and down my spine at the time. Because it was exactly at the time that I was in serious trouble. You see, and all the time that...
Oh, did you already do it?
Yeah.
Just taking the pictures.
Oh, yeah?
I got some vitamins in my mouth here.
or someone far off that, that he really never got tangled up in the affairs of this world. I just, he was more of a figurehead than anything else. And they didn't know what trouble I was in, but my life was in serious danger. And somehow God had got a message 500-600 miles away to some people who didn't know me, and they were praying. I feel that prayer spared my life. It obviously scared the daylights out of me. And I had been split up with my wife a couple times, and because that scared me so much, I said, whoops, there might be more to this thing than what I had realized. And so what I did is I moved back in with my wife and decided to try to make a go of it again. Well, my wife had been very selfish and very controlling and manipulative. In fact, she didn't like the idea while she was working, because she was a nurse, she didn't like the idea that I'd be out drinking most of the night. And sometimes I'd be so drunk that when she got home at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was so drunk I couldn't get out of the chair. And she'd just fly off the handle and beat on me and wail on me, and she embarrassed me in front of my friends and stuff like that. So I had a good reason to resent her. And that was the reasons that I treated her so bad. I never physically abused her, but I would mentally abuse her. I would just make her feel like a worm. I would just mentally castigate her, and she would retaliate by being, she'd pull my hair, beat on me, and she'd do all kinds of crazy things. And so you see, it was not much of a marriage. Well, after that, and all of a sudden, God sparing my life like that, I thought, whoops, I better start taking things more serious and clean up my act. And so we went home. I went home, moved back in, and I said, well, I've been split twice, and if we split once more, then we go ahead and get a divorce. But until then, well, we'll give a half-hearted try at making the marriage work. Well, my wife didn't want a failure. in marriage either. And so she had determined that no matter how mean and cruel I was to her, that she would take it and try to be a good wife. So for about 2 weeks, I still verbally humiliated her and treated her bad. And she took it and was nice back. Well, I don't know about you, but it's kind of hard to be mean to someone if they're nice back. Very long, anyhow. And so what I had done is after a couple of weeks, I started softening up and start treating her a little nicer. Well, then she saw that I was treating her nicer, and she got sweeter. And it kind of snowballed from there. So we were both encouraged because I felt if my wife was going to treat me that good, then she's very desirable. Well, I still was running around. I still was drinking, and she made a point of it to where she was going to try to please me regardless of what I did. And so she would go to the bars with me, and she would dance. Well, she has 2 left feet, and I do too, so we'd make an attempt at dancing anyhow. And so she tried real hard to be a part of my life. And after, I'd say a couple of months, both of us were brought up in the church, and we kind of got feeling guilty because on Sunday mornings we were sleeping off a drunk from the night before, and we thought, well, we probably ought to be going to church. And so we were living out by Standale, and we found a church. It was Talmadge Wesleyan Methodist Church. And their church services started at 11 o'clock, so I could still get plastered Saturday night, still get bombed out of my mind, and still sleep in Sunday morning and make it to church by 11 o'clock. And so we started doing that. And this church was different than what I had ever imagined. Because in this church I found there was something there that I had never seen before. And that was this, that some of the people would give testimonies and testify at God answering prayer. I wasn't used to that. Some people actually smiled and seemed to have some joy. I sure wasn't used to that. The churches where I had been a part of before, it seemed like everyone was miserable. People weren't happy until they left. And here, these people talked about the Lord as if they really knew Him. And I had not experienced that. I had not seen that before. And that was really attracting to me. What did they have that I didn't? And so I started going very regularly, and I began to feel so guilty about the way I'd lived before. I tried to cut out. I wasn't running around so much. I wasn't drinking quite so much. And I was really trying to clean up my life. And I remember it was December 28th of 1970. I had been going to this Wesleyan Methodist Church for, must have been 6-8 months. And there were some evangelists come to town. I have no idea why they had an evangelist come to town between Christmas and New Year, but they did. And it was on a Wednesday night, December 28th. And I had gone to the meetings the previous days, and I just knew something was really hungering in me. And the guy gave an invitation, and I don't believe I walked. I believe I ran to the front. Said a simple prayer like this. I says, God, I made a mess of my life, and I've tried to straighten it around. I've tried to get rid of the sin. And I said, I can't do it. Will you? And had an experience that it was a first for me. While I was on my knees, It was like someone poured warm oil starting at the top of my head, and it ran over my whole body and kept on pouring. When I got up, there was about 100 pounds that was off my shoulders that I never realized was there. The Bible talks about the weight of sin. I felt it lift, and it was gone. Well, I was working at a factory. I'd been there for a number of years. And so in the factory, it was obvious because I was running with some of the women that were in the factory, and all of a sudden they saw this change in my life where before I was one way, and now all of a sudden I used to start preaching at them, and even some of the Baptist guys and some of the other Christians that I didn't even know it, but they were praying for me when I was living so crazy. Now all of a sudden I'm preaching at them, and they don't like what I'm preaching because I'm putting them under conviction. And I remember one incident. They got this thing. They could get a reaction out of me with pornography. And but this time I hated it, and there was a lot of pornography in the shop. And so they would take this nude picture or a nude woman and put it on my machine when I was at break time. And they'd come back, and I was working a die-cast machine where they had fiery pots to melt the zinc and aluminum. And so I would take the picture, just throw it in the fiery pot, and they get a kick out of that. And so they would paste up or tack up this pornography all over my machine, and just to get a reaction out of me, which would be all the same. I'd burn the pictures. Well, I got to where I was so disgusted with it that I'd go around looking for the pornography just to throw it in the furnaces. And they didn't like that. And so they were getting on my case. And they have like a wax pen or some kind of oil pen or something that you could write on stuff with. And it won't necessarily be permanent. What I had done is my machinery had big flat doors. And I wrote on this something like this, that I was blood-bought, redeemed by the blood of the Lamb, whole bunch of things, given my life to Christ. He's coming again. I've been just redeemed and washed in the blood, and just a whole lot of things I wrote on there. And then underneath it I signed my name. And that was a statement in that factory. And I left it there. Well, in the next 2-3 days, I think there was about 11 or 12 others had signed their name underneath mine. And then the management found out about it. They didn't want me writing stuff on their machines. And so they called me in the office, and they said that we want you to take that off the machinery. And I said, hold it. I said, you allow pornography all over this place. And I said that you want me to take that off, which is good? And they said, well, the shop superintendent said, well, I'm a Christian too. He says, but we just can't be doing that kind of stuff. And I said, you mean you allow the pornography? And he said, well, we'll get rid of the pornography if you get rid of that. And I said, okay. It was their machinery, and I felt that was right. Plus, I felt that we'd made a statement, so I did. But that was one of the things that happened. And about the same time, I had I got involved with I think it was Teen Challenge, and there was people that would go to Greenville just about every night. And we go street witnessing up and down the street, and we we would see prostitutes get saved. We would see drug addicts get saved. We'd see people that were high on drugs, that were just stoned out of their mind. People would witness to them, and they would ask the Lord to come in their life, and we'd see their trip crash. When they ask the Lord in their heart, they come up stone sober. And so I saw some incredible things that God was doing back then. And I just thank the Lord for the things that He's shown me, for redeeming me. I was literally on the brink of disaster, on the brink of hell. Had I been killed in that motorcycle, I know where I'd be today. I thank the Lord that by His Spirit, He is not bound by time and space, and somehow His Holy Spirit got a message miles and miles away that I was in trouble and that there were people willing to pray. And that spared my life. And absolutely that was a turning point. Now there's been a number of things that's happened since then, but that was the beginning of a road, a beginning of a tremendous turnaround. I've had to learn some hard lessons since then. The selfishness is not something that disappears overnight. The pride is not something that disappears overnight. All the rejection and the hurts, they don't disappear overnight. But it can start overnight. And so I thank the Lord where I've come from. I thank Him for the family He's now given. I have 5 wonderful daughters.
That's as big as it is, Tom.
Yeah, you can't see much.
You can see the baby.
I can have. I've seen my children grow up serving the Lord. I couldn't be happier now. I've had some health problems in the past, and I've seen God sustain and help and heal and deliver. If you ever have any doubts that God is real, I'm here to tell you, I'm living proof that He answers prayer. And His life-changing. It is life-changing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen again, and if you've been watching this, and if you've tuned in a little late and you're wondering what you've been watching, you're watching a video broadcast called Precious Testimonies, and we've been listening to a friend share about his life, what God's done in his life, and his name was or is Al WALMA. And I just want to say thank you, Al. Thank you for sharing what you shared. And my thoughts to what he's been sharing is, wow, what a testimony. What a testimony his life has been and continues to be. And this short segment right here, I'm just here to tell you that there's more to come. Al will be coming back on, and he will be sharing some more good insight. So I encourage you to stay tuned, and don't change that channel, or don't change that picture that you're watching. Thank you.
You know, from time to time, in our walk with Christ, once we get saved, we learn some real lessons that usually are brought on by trials. And about 16 years ago now, I was running a garage and a body shop, and I was working with a lot of chemicals and the paints. And I got real sick, and I got overcome by the fumes. And the chemicals in the paint actually began to shut down the organs in my body. And there was about 4 months where I could not do anything. I would get out of bed in the morning and I would crawl to the bathroom, and then I would crawl back into bed. And I was very, 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 very sick. A friend of mine referred me to a nutritionist, a doctor, and set it up, so I went there, and what he discovered was that my body was depleted of minerals. Without minerals, your organs don't work. When your organs don't work, this is what happened. He said he could tell that there was food in my stomach that was there for 3 to 4 days. There was meat. And he says the food was not digesting, it was rotting. And I was very bloated. I was very, 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 very sick. And what he had said is that the chemicals in the paints that I was using, and I was using some very exotic paints, some polyurethane, some 2 and 3 part epoxies, which would actually form balls in your lungs and would hinder your ability to breathe. And that had been accumulating in me over the years, and some of the catalysts in the different paints were very hazardous. And I never had adequate equipment to handle such hazardous paints, but I went ahead and did it anyhow, and so now it all caught up with me. Well, there was about 4 months where I couldn't do anything, and at this particular time, I was I guess I was really taught wrong about what the Scripture teaches, because whenever I would open my Bible, I would feel condemned. Because whenever I read the Bible, and the Bible says this is the way a Christian's life ought to be victorious, be prosperous, be healthy, be free and joyful and stuff like that, my life was the opposite from that. And here I felt deathly sick, and so every time I read the Bible, I felt condemned. When I would pray, it seems like my prayers wouldn't get any higher than the ceiling. And you see, at one point in time in my life, whether it was in response to a message or whatever, I had told the Lord, I said, Lord, I says, do whatever it takes to make me the man you want me to be. I kind of gave him the steering wheel or the reins, and I told him he could do anything he wanted to. Little did I know what he was going to require. And so apparently he took it serious. When we give him the reins or the steering wheel, he keeps it. We kind of relinquish. We relinquish to him the direction our lives should go. And so he allowed me, I won't say he directed me in everything, but he allowed me to really get into trouble. And here I found myself sick. And because I had done that, I said, Lord, where are you? Here I've tried to live for you, I've tried to serve you, I've tried to do the best I can for you, and here I find myself in a mess. My health is gone. I had to sell all the equipment and stuff to pay the bills and to get out of debt, which I did. But here I was, not destitute, but terribly lonely and hurting, feeling like a total failure, and I stopped reading the Bible. Why would I want to read the Bible if everything just condemned me? Why would I want to pray if it was an effort of futility? So I stopped reading. I stopped praying. I was hoping to die. I was hurting so bad. I wasn't a part of a church at that time. I just wasn't. And so, anyhow, I find myself in this situation, and this is what happened. Something nice happened to me. And I wasn't used to nice things happening to me. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I says, that was interesting. And right on the heels of that, something else happened to me that caught my attention, that I couldn't explain away. And I remember in my heart saying, God, is that you? And he spoke to me. One of the things I learned early on, and that is that God does speak to his people. And that a lot of times, his people just aren't listening. Well, he spoke to me, and he spoke my name. He said, yes, son, it's me. And I told him, I says, well, I thought you left. I said, everyone else did. And he spoke these words to my heart. He said, son, what kind of friend would I be if I left you when you needed me the most? I said, oh, I was desperately in need of him. That felt so good. You see, we weren't on talking terms for some time. And trying to live for him and having a bunch of bad things happen, you wonder if you're on the right track, you're on the wrong track. You wonder if you even belong to his family. And when he speaks to your heart and says, yes, son. He says, what kind of friend would I be if I left you when you needed me the most? Well, I desperately needed him. And I says, well, God, I says, I don't have anything left to offer you. Here I failed. I felt I failed my family as a provider, as a spiritual leader in my home. I felt I failed them there, failed my family. I had failed in business. I had to sell everything just to pay the bills and stuff. And I felt like a total failure and reject. And I told him that. I said, well, God, I said, I don't have anything to offer you. I failed at everything I've done. And he spoke to me again. He said, well, he said, you never did have anything to offer me. Oh. And then he reminded me of the scripture that says that while we were in sin without hope in this world, Christ came to redeem us. And then he said this. He says, incidentally, son, he says, everyone's in the same boat. No one has anything to offer me. It's just pride that makes people think they have something. And you see, by then I was starting to feel a lot better, because I could see, as I reflect back over my life, that I was trying to earn God's favor. I was trying to do things to please him, but to earn his favor. And I learned there that we can't earn even our best efforts are futile. And that I learned to stop a lot of my own efforts at winning his approval, winning his favor, earning anything. And I began to relax and enjoy being a son of the King of Kings. I wish there was an easier way to learn lessons like that, because I still see many people in churches. They get ministries going. They try real hard to please God because maybe they think in their efforts they're trying to earn something, and they really can't. it seems like when they try to earn merit from the Lord, it's relying too much on themselves, and it never is enough. There's never any peace in us trying with our own merits, with our own efforts. There's never any peace because there's never enough. We can never be good enough, righteous enough, holy enough. We can't measure up. Christ did it all himself. And so the peace that has come out of that, and right after that, I thought, well, gee, now I learned my lesson. Maybe now I'm going to get better. Well, it wasn't quite that easy because it took a lot of work, and I started a new business shortly after that, and now that was about 16 years ago, and now God has tremendously blessed my efforts, and I'm doing very well. But knowing that I was secure in Him gave me tremendous encouragement to go on. Right now I can serve Him when I don't have to earn anything. I can just be me. I can just be a son, and I can rest in that. I don't have to be doing this work. I don't have to be doing that work. I don't have to be striving. I don't have to be doing this. I serve Him because I want to, not because I have to. I serve Him out of gratitude, not anything else. And that has been a tremendous help. One of the other things that has helped too, obviously, with the background that I had, we learned some principles of deliverance. See, you can't play with fire and not get burned. You play in the devil's territory, he is going to occupy areas of your life. And once you become born again, they now belong to God. But unless he's kicked out and forced to leave, he'll stay there and occupy, and he can still affect your life. And so we learned some principles of deliverance, and one of them is that the Bible says that the sins of the fathers can be carried on from generation to generation. And I thank the Lord so much for learning that we can stop the enemy's attack on our family. We can stop the ground that he holds. And through prayer and confession of our sins and through the proper channels, we can spare our family some of the devil's attack. Oh, he'll still attack, it's just that he can't have the victory. And so we can affect our children. We can affect not only our own lives, but our families, but our children's, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We can change history for our children and great-grandchildren. So those are things that we've learned, and I just thank the Lord so much for the daughters he's given. I have 5 daughters now. I guess when I think back, that I could see how really with women, with females, I could see now that I really hated them for years of my life. And now I've got a whole household full just to love. Mm-hmm. And so what a change and what a blessing. And so I tell you something else, and that is that with my dad, he did teach me some good things. He was a good man, even though his life was had hardships in some of the churches that he went to. In fact, to tell you something, one of the instances that he would go to the jails, and he played accordion, and he would preach and sing at the jails on Sunday afternoon. And sometimes he would take me along, and I would play guitar, and and we'd go to the jails and do that. And then he would also go to the nursing homes. And he did a lot of work like that outside of the church. And in fact, there was one time that a guy that was in jail, he got saved. And the kind of trouble, it just seemed kind of ironic because the church, when he got saved, he got out of jail, and then he started coming to the church, and the church people kind of hauled my dad in the carpet. They says, they don't want ex-cons in the church. And so it was that kind of stuff. Dad was a good man. He loved God and was serving God with his life, and that probably caused him the trouble. A lot of the trouble that he got in, and so we've learned to expect that we learn to expect some trouble when we're trying to serve God because the enemy don't like it, and he's going to do everything he can to knock us off course. And some of the principles I learned from my dad, our family too, yet carry on with that heritage where we go to nursing homes, once in a while we go to prisons, or we go to different places and put on a gospel concert. And so the heritage that he's given us is still being carried on. And so I really love my dad. My dad, I'm glad, I think I spared him. I don't think he ever knew the kind of life we were living. And so we spared him as much as we could. But I thank the Lord that I'll be seeing him again in glory. And that every once in a while I can just get the idea that he's smiling when someone tells him what we're doing. And so I hope this helps someone. This is my daughter Angela. She's going to sing a song that is really dear to her heart and mine.
This song is simply a love song to God from our hearts to His. It's called My Life is in Your Hands. Life can be so good. Life can be so hard. Never knowing what each day will bring to where you are. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I can't see. Knowing that you'll meet my every need. My life is in your hands. My heart is in your keeping. I'm never without hope, not when my future is with you. My life is in your hands, and though I may not see clearly, I will lift my voice and sing. 'Cause your love does amazing things. Lord, I know my life is in your hands. Nothing is for sure. Nothing is for keeps. All I know is that your love will live eternally. So I will find my rest, and I will find my peace, knowing that you'll meet my every need. My life is in your hands. My heart is in your keeping. I'm never without hope, not when my future is in you. My life is in your hands, and though I may not see clearly, I will lift my voice and sing. 'Cause your love does amazing things. Lord, I know my life is in your hands. When I'm at my weakest, oh, you carry me. Then I become my strongest, Lord, in your hands. My life is in your hands. My heart is in your keeping. I'm never without hope, not when my future is in you. My life is in your hands, and though I may not see clearly, I will lift my voice and sing, 'cause your love does amazing things. Lord, I know my life is in your hands. I trust you, Lord. My life is in your hands.
Well, thank you, Angie. That was beautiful. That song she just sang was so beautiful, and we just thank her for that. If you've been flipping channels and you wonder what you've been watching here, this is a broadcast called Precious Testimonies, and we have just heard a man by the name of WALMA share his life story of where he has been in his life and how God has become real and alive to him in a way that he never thought would ever happen. And you just heard his daughter sing, and she didn't have any background music, and she didn't have any help to make her feel real comfortable and sound real professional. But we're not trying to be professional here. We're just trying to be ourselves and to have fun while we're doing this and just relax. So I hope that's how Angie felt when she was singing her song. So, and today we are going to go into a second segment of this broadcast with Al's wife. She's going to be sharing her side of the story of how she dealt with situations that they went through in their marriage, and she's going to go into a little bit of history before that of her life, how she grew up and what her life was like as a child and things like that. And just to refresh your memory a little bit, I'd like to share a little more about Al and what he shared, just in case you haven't been watching. And he shared that he came from a church background. He was a preacher's kid, and as he was growing up, he shared how he became bitter, and he resented being or having to go to church every time the doors were open, and just having to be there every time, because his father was very dedicated. And so when Al got old enough to be on his own, he rebelled, and he got into doing his own thing, even though he'd been taught the right way, how to live life, how to live according to God's ways. He rebelled, and he went his own way. And he shared how there were many, many times where his life was spared, where he should have died, he shouldn't have lived, but God was there, even though he wasn't serving him. And he also shared that in that time frame he had gotten married, and he said the first 2 years of his life was really bad. And now we're going to hear the second half of that part. And I just want to introduce to you now GERRY, Al's wife. Her name is GERRY WALMA, and she also feels like she's not a professional speaker or a public speaker, but we have encouraged her just to be herself and to share from her heart, which is exactly what she's going to be doing here. So I encourage you to listen, because I know that there's a lot, that she has got a lot inside that she can share that maybe will be of some help to you. And I encourage you to listen, because there's a lot going on in the world today within Christianity and the religious world, you know, that we think is supposed to be Christianity. And she's going to be sharing a little bit about that. So just sit back and listen and see what God may have for you, and maybe how this can help you in your life, okay? Thank you, and God bless you now.
Hi, my name is GERRY WALMA, and I just want to share with you a few things that have occurred in the last 53 years that might be of assistance to you. The first thing I want to do is talk about a lady named Sonora. And you're going to say, why are you talking about Sonora? But she's a singer that I heard the eve before Thanksgiving. And when she comes out on stage to sing, you know that she's not going to follow the orchestra or the band or the choir. She's going to do her own thing. She's doing it because God's telling her that this is the way to do it. She doesn't really fit in the mold that probably the average normal person should be in, because she's doing it the way God's telling her to. So essentially, since my salvation experience, it's been like my activities, what God's done isn't what He's done with everybody else. It's special for me. So my connection between her, Sonora, and me is that we're both walking with the Lord, doing what He's telling us to do, and it doesn't always fit in with what everybody else does. And by the way, the song she sang was, "Thanks, thanks, I give you thanks for all that you've done for me." And that's the message of my song, that God has been good. As I referred to before, I'm a 53-year-old woman, wife of one man for 32 years. We have 5 daughters, a son-in-law.
Okay. Hi.
Oh, there we go. That's what we want.
Oh.
Keep it up.
Hi. Hey there, Pumpkin. Where are you?
Jerry,
I'm
we
right
need you
here.
to look up at us.
Hi there,
Big
sweetheart.
smile.
What are you looking at? What you looking at?
I'm that. We go and just get a picture taken. Get a 5x7 for $1. We all grew up in the Grand Rapids area. One of them has since gone home to be with the Lord. He was diagnosed as being mentally retarded, but 30 years ago, that's the only title they could give them. He was a blessing. He was of a simple mind, but he loved Jesus, and he's saying, "Jesus loves me," to everybody in the community. So for a far back memory, that is something that I remember as being really special, that he was singing for Jesus even in his limited abilities. My father was a crane operator. He worked out of town, was only home on the weekends. This created a problem in the home because my mother had to be father and mother for the majority of the week, and then she had to relinquish those rights when he came home for Saturday and Sunday. This caused friction between the two of them, but the problem that it created for us was an example of a woman who took charge of a situation that a man should be doing. This played a part in my future, in my marriage, because that is what I saw to exist, was a mother who took control. That proved to be a problem, but I'll talk about that later. Being the oldest of 6, I ended up getting hand-me-downs from all my cousins, so I never felt like I was well dressed, that I fit in with a crowd. It was a difficult thing to deal with. My parents sacrificed a lot and sent us to the Christian school. I really appreciate that part of my life. Even though I wasn't a believer at the time, I appreciated the input that their sacrifices put into our lives. The problem with that was that we lived in a community where all the other children went to public school, and so I went to Christian school, so that was an instance that seemed to be repeated for many times of feeling isolated and just not fitting in. We had an experience where, being the oldest of 6 kids, you just felt like you're always left out. And I guess When I look back, kindergarten days, there was a good thing that we had doll day at school. And I felt so blessed because my mom and dad...
Are you taking a picture of it, or are you filming?
Sometimes of feeling isolated and feeling lonely, there's still good things that make you feel like, okay, somebody cares. We lived in a community where it was becoming increasingly more dangerous to live because of just the location. Things that I remember about my life as I get a little bit older is a Sunday evening. It was like and I was at the age of 12. I was laying in my bed, and the next thing I knew, there was a man with his hands through the window trying to choke me. This was a really scary thing, and I thought, oh, how can I live? I yelled, he ran, the cops came, he was never found. But experience that came from that moment was a lack of trust in men, because if one could hurt me, why couldn't another? So that was an experience that I had to deal with. We shortly moved out of the neighborhood because it proved to be that if the children couldn't be safe in their own bedroom, then it's not a good place to be. So we moved to a different vicinity of town, northeast Grand Rapids, where I attended junior high and then high school later on. The insecurity of having 5 children in the family wasn't a lot, but when I was in 9th grade, my mother decides that she's pregnant again. And that was a hard thing to deal with at 14, because I thought, oh, I already feel so irregular and out of it, and here you are coming up with a baby. How could you do that to me? The truth be known that this younger sister and I probably have more in common than the other sisters. We went down the list, and I won't enumerate, but there was at least 6 or 8 things that even in the 12 years they've been married in our life, that there's so many similarities, so that the Lord was really a blessing by giving her to us, to me. But at the time I didn't see it that way. 10 years after that, I went to a class reunion of the classmates that I had in 9th grade at that time, only to find out that they were jealous that we had a baby in the house. They wished it could have been them. So all this time I was holding it against my mother for being pregnant because it was a rough thing for me to deal with, only to realize that my classmates wished they could have been me. That was an interesting thing to happen. About the same time, because my father was the youngest of his siblings, all my cousins were older than I, so I really didn't feel like I had a friend, except for one cousin. Her name was Pauline, and she had some kidney troubles, and at the age 14, I was 14, she was 15, she died of complications from kidney failure. And I really felt devastated because God took my friend away. It really wasn't God taking my friend away, it was just taking her out of her misery. But the way I was seeing it was that God stole my best friend. And if he could steal my friend, how could he be real? So that was something that I dealt with. I attended a Christian high school, and to give you the magnitude of the size, there were 401 students in that class. And I really felt like I was number 401. I just didn't feel like I fit. There weren't many people that I could really relate well to. A few good friends that I've seen them periodically over the years. But it was a time in my life where I was learning godly principles, but I didn't have God in my life. When I graduated from high school, I went into nurses training at what's now Community College and completed the LPN course. Began to work at Butterworth Hospital. Working there and helping people did a lot to help my low self-esteem and my loneliness, because I could throw myself into my work and I could stay busy and not really think about how alone I felt. I shouldn't have really felt that way because there were a lot of people that cared. But at that point, all I saw was me by myself, nobody caring for me. It was after I'd finished nurses training that I met my husband through a blind date that was set up between my sister and his cousin. And it was an interesting experience because it was one of the first times that a guy actually paid attention to me. We were only 16 or 17, so he had to go back home to Iowa, and we continued with a writing relationship. humorous things that my daughters reminded me of my sisters is that I would like write love letters to him and put them in the drawer, and my sisters would find him and run around the house calling them out as loud as they possibly could. The urge to kill was there. I knew I couldn't kill, but I felt like it. So putting those letters aside, we did develop a relationship after he moved to Grand Rapids. He was going to go to Calvin College, but didn't work out. He ended up getting a job, and then he got me. We were engaged. I believe that we postponed it several times because we knew that our motives for getting married weren't right, but yet we didn't know how to back out of it. So we married. We were both 20. I think he married me for my money, and boy was he surprised when we got married because there wasn't anything there. And I really believe that the reasons that I married was to get out of a home situation that was uncomfortable, where I was unhappy, where I didn't feel like people appreciated me. And I think his reasons for getting married were as selfish as mine. It had to be better than what we had. Now, you know that if you go into a marriage with a foundation like that, it's going to be rocky, and it was. I know he shared 2 years, but I think it was 3 years that were kind of bad. He was in and out, publicly professing that he was unfaithful. He didn't really care if I knew it or not, because he figured I'd be hurt so bad that I would just get up and leave. Well, we stuck in there for quite a while, and then he did leave a couple times, came back for short periods of time just because he probably ran out of a place to stay and didn't have any money. So he was there for a while, then he would leave again. And I have to admit, in that time, I probably was involved in things that weren't real healthy, just because sometimes a bar, when you're encouraged to go there by fellow workmates, you can find a temporary sort of comfort in a bar, in a drink, in the company you keep. It's not anything that's healthy. It's not permanent, but people do it. I did it. The last time he came back, I finally decided that I had to make it work. And it wasn't necessarily because I really thought I loved him more or loved him less, but it was I didn't want to admit failure. That was my final recourse for inviting him back home, trying to make it work. As nasty he would be, I would be nice. The worse he was, the nicer I was. And I think it was driving him crazy, because he thought, this just can't be. She's always been so mean and cruel to me, but some of my nastiness was in response to his nastiness. If you get hurt, the natural thing to do is hurt back. So I worked real hard just to be nice, fix his favorite foods, do things with him that I really didn't want to do, which for one instance was going to bars with him on Saturday night. I knew how destructive that was, but I thought, well, I guess if we're going to make it go, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices too. So I put on a smile and went to the bar with him. Well, people were praying, parents especially, that things would happen. And so I think we began to feel committed and convicted that we ought to go to church. Because we both grew up in a church. I don't think I had to go to meetings as much as he did, but I felt like it. Part of the church issue that I felt a problem with was that, and this is reverting back to something that happened before, when you lose faith in the things that you thought were trustworthy, when things happen that destroy your faith. When I was in high school, I did some babysitting for 2 families in the church. And I was so naive to believe that nobody got divorces or nobody messed around, but both couples, the man was having an affair with the Sunday school superintendent, and the other one, the wife, was having an affair with somebody else. And those things were really devastating to me, because it made me not feel like, why go to church? These people are churchgoers, they're supposed to be leaders in the church, and here they are doing that kind of stuff. So that's why once we married and we lost interest in church, it didn't really bother me that much, because I didn't have much use for it, because all the church activities that I had caused pain to me, and I didn't want any more of it. So we had bought a mobile home in Standale. And there was a little Wesleyan Methodist church down the road that didn't have a service till 11 o'clock. So we could still party till 2, 3 in the morning and go to church. So I believe that was a direct answer to prayer of parents and loved ones who knew that we were going down the wrong trail and we had to change. Well, we started going there out of convenience, and as time went by I could see some changes in him. We also had the birth of our first daughter by that time, and I made a deal with God. I says, God, I know I got to change and turn myself over to you completely, but you know, you just got to do something for me to prove that it's real. Make this church thing a real thing to me. So what I need to do is to see my husband walk to the altar and commit to the Lord. And if you will do that for me, I'll give you my all, and you'll have it. You got it. Well, I never really thought it would happen, but God's plans are different. There was a revival service between Christmas and New Year's, I guess of 1970, because Chris was like just 3, 4 months old. And I saw him running to the altar and I said, well, that's it. I asked, I received, I'm going. So that was the beginning of a new era of life. The salvation factor, a new husband, a new baby. It was just really encouraging. Like, okay, we can maybe make this. Now, I won't say that it was peaches and cream from there on, because it wasn't. It was lots of ups and downs. It was exciting. One of the first things that happened shortly after we got saved was that Al says, I want all I can of you, Lord. So we met up with some people who had this thing called the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And we prayed for it. And I received the evidence of tongues before my husband did. That about drove him bonkers, because he had something he wanted and I had it and he didn't have it yet. So we brought this information that we received back to the Wesleyan Church. And we were overzealous with what we had. We probably should have been boxed up for 6 months so we could calm down, because we were speaking the truth but not really knowing what we were talking about. There were an experience where we got involved with the youth group, and we could see that these kids weren't living for the Lord, and we addressed the issue, talked to the parents. Parents became quite offended, and as it turned out, the pastor said, either you're going to have to be quiet with what you learned, or you're going to have to leave. And that was a hard decision to make, but we believed that if we stayed, we were going to cause more disharmony. And so we opted to leave and move on to different experiences. Now, the one family that we talked about from that church, whose children weren't really living with the Lord, they felt like they could get into heaven on their parents' apron strings, have since had real experiences with the Lord. They're pastoring churches in the community. And so we really felt like the message we left was important, but the fact that we didn't stay was just as important, because we were causing disharmony. And God really is a God of harmony and peace. We said our piece and then we left. From that moment, we ended up in a coffee house in Greenville. I will admit that this was the first time I ever heard more than one person pray at a time, and I couldn't figure out how God can understand 25 people praying all at the same time. That may seem humorous, but at that time I thought, God's a big God, but he can't hear 25 people praying at one time. That was an experience with Teen Challenge that really made a difference in our lives. We realized the needs of people around us. The fact that they were more lonely than I made me think I shouldn't be feeling so sorry for myself, but I still was, because I wasn't getting what I thought I needed, even though it was much better than it was the year before. We spent about a year working in Teen Challenge in Greenville. Met some lovely young people who we still see occasionally. Another problem that occurred there is that there was sin in the leadership, and one of the leaders decided to shack up with one of the gals that he was working with. So there again, there's another picture that you see from my past. You see, okay, leadership, people are supposed to be in leadership, and here they are screwing around with teenage girls. This happened probably almost 30 years ago, and I know for a fact that the girl that he sexually abused is still fighting the battle. She hasn't won it. It's still affected her. It's affected her married life. It's affected her children. And the reason I say that is because this young lady became my sister-in-law. And she was so hurt by that she could not maintain a good married life. At this point, they're divorced. She has 3 boys. The youngest boy is about 10. He's in school. The other ones have graduated from school or just sitting at home doing nothing. And I really believe that the sin that was started way back there 30 years ago affects my husband's, or my brother, his ex-wife, and 3 kids. So I'm really serious about the fact that I believe that if a person is in leadership, they have certain responsibilities and they're very grave, and the Lord will hold them accountable for the fact that they've hurt people that way. While we were in the Greenville situation, we ran across some other people who interpreted scripture for us and invited us to be part of a communal situation. Now, I don't know if Al shared anything about community, but that was an experience that we won't forget. It was an experience where the other man kind of took control of the situation, because that's typical of a communal situation, that there is a domineering factor in it and everybody kind of bows down to what they have to say. What my husband did in that situation was to isolate himself in his bedroom and read the Bible. So that's the good part that came out of it. He was reading the Word, he got really down into it, but the bad part of it was that he was neglecting his responsibilities of being head of his own household. So what was going on there was that I was going to this other gentleman for advice, leaving my husband out of the picture. And I did that just because he wasn't around to do it. And we were probably in that situation for about a year, year and a half. We learned a lot to trust people, to trust God, but yet we realized that what we were in was an unhealthy situation. People outside of our community situation could see that it was really bad for us. My husband would be the one going to work all the time. The other guy with more children, more bills, would be staying home because he felt the Lord to stay home. Now, I just add that felt the Lord to stay home thing is that I believe that a lot of people use that as an excuse because they think they can get away with it. We chose to move out of there after we had had 2 children. One of the experiences of God's protection while we were there were we had young guys that should have been in jail living with us. And there was a robbery one night. And our daughter slept in a room adjacent to ours, and it was not unusual for her to come in to the bedroom almost every night and crawl in with us because she felt safer that way. Well, this is one of the first nights she didn't wake up to come out into the dining room to come to our bedroom, and that was the night of the robbery. So it's very likely that if she had awakened, walking into that room, saw the robbery in progress, her life probably would have been snuffed out, because she could have, even at 2.5, 3 years old, could have identified the person that was doing the robbery. So in spite of everything else, I really thank the Lord for His protection on her, because she could have been really hurt. When we moved out of there, my husband found a house and bought it, and we signed papers for it before I ever saw it. That is either guts or foolishness, but I moved into a house that I'd never seen. There was a motorcycle on the porch, not ours, with oil all over the floor. I remember talking to Wheelchair Dave, because he's the guy we bought it from. He says, "Oh, everybody complains about stuff like that." I said, "But there was peanut butter and jelly that I had to scrape off the inside of the cupboard." He says, "Oh, people always complain about stuff like that." And I go, "Yes, Dave, you've never lived like this. You don't know what it's all about." It was a blessing that we got out. We bought the house for almost next to nothing, fixed it up, sold it, made some profit. With that profit, I assumed that by now we had 3 kids, that they'd all go to a Christian school, and the money that we made from the house would go for that. Well, God doesn't always go the way you want him to go. And at that time, my husband had a garage business that just went under, so all the money we would have made from the sale of the house went to pay off the bills in the house. So there we are, sitting with not too much money, and sold the house, moved to Jenison, and then he got sick and he was without work for about 4 months. That was one of my first tests of really trusting God after my salvation. Would God provide? Would he take care of what was going on? And would he take care of me when I now then was pregnant for a 5th child? And I was everybody was real happy about this baby except for me. I thought, God, how could you do this to me? We don't have any money, and here I am pregnant again. What are we going to do? And his word was, just relax, I'll take care of you. Which he did. Money came in the mailbox that we never expected to see. There was no name. They just put it in the mailbox. It was there. In this time, right after Emily was born, we had an experience where money was tight, and my husband had a guitar. The guitar had gone to Guatemala, Honduras. It was special. But we had to eat, we had to pay bills. So we sold the guitar. And here is 4 children and 2 adults about in tears because the guitar is going. Well, the gentleman realized that it was really special to us. So he wrote on the check, he said, if you ever want to buy this thing back, come and get it, and you can buy it for what I bought it for. We thought, there's no way on earth that we're ever going to have money to buy a guitar. Well, a friend of ours discovered that the guitar had been sold, and she said, well, you can't sell that thing because that belongs to God. The people wouldn't answer the phone, so we knew where they lived, so we drove out there and we bought the guitar back and brought it home. And that happened to be on one of our anniversaries. I can't remember which one it was, but we walked in the house with it. People knew that we were going to be bringing the guitar back. So my in-laws were sitting there. My husband was so tired, he just wanted everybody to leave so he could go to bed. A mutual friend was there, and they're just sitting there waiting. And we walk in the door, and we forget to shut the door to the to the breezeway. And he walked out. He says, "What's the idea of wasting all this money on heat? You know, we don't have any money. We got to save the money for heat. Why did you?" And then his mouth just bogged open. There sat the guitar. In his time of weakness, it was a beautiful thing to see his expression on his face because his guitar came back, something that was precious to him. It wasn't the piece of wood and the strings that meant. It was something that meant to him was that God cared and gave him back something that was special. So since then, we've never even thought about selling the guitar. It's just not an item. You know, we would fast for weeks before we'd give up that guitar. There's more stories to come with the guitar. It's the kids all knew how much it meant to him. As the children got older, we had an experience that they'll never forget. It's 10 summers at a campground, living in 2 school buses. Now, we as adults would see the inconvenience of it, but the kids were saying, this is fun. We've got a pool, we've got a play area, we've got friends. This is all right. So for our whole family, I would say those 10 summers were really growing experiences. Got to meet a lot of neat people that we still run across periodically now. Obviously, we couldn't live there in the winter because it gets kind of cold in an unheated bus in an unoccupied campground. The Lord provided us a home on Green Lake that we could rent for about 5 winters. And we casually mentioned, well, Lord, we'll keep coming back here till the neighbors are saved. There was a family with 3 children who lived across the street from us. Parents were from Catholic background, and they just didn't have any use for churches. The Bible church that was in the community was told to this neighbor that it's a cultist church because they talk about God and they don't talk about Mary. So she never wanted to send her kids to that church. Our children attended the Awana program there where they learned a lot about the Lord, discipline and training and memorizing scripture. And we said, well, when the whole family gets saved, we can buy a house. Well, here's the kids, 1, 2, 3. Get born again. They're attending Awana. They're learning the Bible verses. They're reciting the Bible verses to their parents at home. And Mom gets saved. Well, the last winter we were there, it was September, and we moved in, and they said, guess what? Mark got saved, the dad. I says, oh, this is cool. Okay, God, we did our job, you did your job, now we can have a house, right? And I was just, it was a joking comment. It wasn't necessarily something that I would really think that would happen. Well, this is the end of September, and by February, we're in the house I'm sitting in right now. We were able to sell some property, put together a down payment, and buy a home. My prayer request was a country house in the city. And people go, you're crazy, you're never going to get it. But our home sits on an acre of land, and we can walk to the Jennison Myers. So I think that's country living in the city. My husband has this humongous barn that he can go and seek refuge when he feels attacked by all the women that are in our household. And he claims that he fixed it up because I wanted him out of the house, out of his home office, but I really believe deep down in my heart he was seeing a granddaughter coming a couple days a week, and he could see the noise. He thought, I can't function with noise, so I'm going to have to do something else. So he was able to fix up his barn into his office, so he has this private recluse where he can just go. The 10 years that we've spent here in this house have been an education. The prior owner did a lot of remodeling that was unsafe, that there's no reason in the world why we shouldn't be dead from explosions or electronic problems, and he just put it together in a bad way, but God protected us. I'm thankful for where we are. Our kids found work in the neighborhood babysitting that's still going on. That was like 10 years ago that the babysitting job kind of got passed down from one child to another because the other ones got married and went off and did their own thing. We find it a pleasure to be here. I found employment at an adult foster care home next to our house where I work 3 evenings a week. The evening shifts work really well because in addition to working there, all of our 5 children have been homeschooled. The 3 youngest ones have not really attended school other than for driver's ed. The 2 older ones stopped going to the public school in this community when they were going into 7th grade and 4th grade. That time that we began the homeschooling was when Emily was born and my husband was sick, and it was like, what else could he expect of me between my husband and God? But we started homeschooling then when it wasn't really that terribly popular, but I did it because he said, you're going to do it. He said, you've got 3 months to get ready. I says, okay. So the homeschooling was convenient with my working in the afternoon because we could do the school in the morning, I could still go to work in the afternoon. I was close enough by that if the kids felt like they needed to talk to mom, they could come and talk to mom, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's a situation that was healthy because I didn't feel like I was neglecting them. And the fact that their father had an office in our home, that made it quite a bit better too. I am thankful for living here because it's been a good outreach position. We've, as a family, have gone to this adult foster care home for the last several years to do a service. It's been really good for the kids to go to minister to the senior citizens. It's made them a more well-rounded person. The fact that they were homeschooled, I believe, for my children, made them as well as me able to converse with 3-month-old granddaughters, 2-year-olds that come for babysitting, 6-year-olds that come to babysit, parents who are in their 80s, and adopted grandparents next door who are in their 90s. Sometimes there's opportunities to share with them what God's done for me, even with these adult people, so that they can feel confident that if God chose to take the breath out of their life, that they know where they're going to go. So being able to share that with senior citizens is a real comforting thing. As far as the kids going out and doing concerts with their dad, I know that he'd like me to sing with them, but I feel better in the audience just being the cheerleader. Come on, you can do it, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. And that part has been important to me, just to be the backbone to support them in what they're doing. It's a real pleasure to say that the children that we've nurtured have become quite active ministering to children of their own age in different youth groups. And it's a real treat just to see them doing the work of the Lord. One of the experiences I was talking about is when we took our children, the ones who were 18 and over, and a group of people, and went to a jail to minister music there. It was an interesting thing. One gal that went there had to take her earrings off, her watch, her belt, her shoes, because something was showing metal in the metal detector. She thought, what more am I going to have to take off? But we figured it out. None of us but her wore expensive enough belts to go through the metal detector. So the same girl who had trouble going through the metal detector was walking off with one of their drum stools because she thought it belonged to us. So we thought, you better leave this here or you're going to stay. But in the midst of this concert, this guitar that we grew to love so much got tipped over and cracked in half. And you could see the look on his kids and his wife going like, that's God's guitar. How could that happen, you know? I was kind of shocked. We had just started going to the church that we attend now called Granville Christian Fellowship. We weren't really that well known or that big of a part of it. We'd probably only gone there a couple months, and they considered this ministry as the outreach of their church. So they said, well, we'll pay to get the guitar fixed. And that was just a real shock to us that some people that we really didn't know that well were willing to spend $600 or better to fix a guitar that was broken in God's service. Well, as it turned out, the guy that tripped on the cord, that tipped it over, his household insurance paid for it. So we discovered that this guitar, valued right now, is probably $1,200. He had it restored, so for $600 he's got like a brand new guitar. And the guitar is still being used as a focal point of ministry because he knows that God gave him the guitar, gave it back to him, and restored it. And so he as well as the rest of us really appreciate the fact that God was in it that way.
I just want to ask you, Jerry, a couple questions here and just see if there's maybe a few things that you can share to help some people out there how they can help keep their family functioning, you know, in the Christian world, that they're living in. They're living in the world, but they're Christians, and they need to have help and advice, encouragement of how they can help their children and their family stay together. And I wish that Jerry's children were here. You did see Angela, but I wish you could see all of them. But you can't right now, but we will be showing a little bit later a picture of all of them together, and you'll be able to see this family, just 5 beautiful daughters, and with this granddaughter and a son-in-law now in the picture. And so I'm going to ask Jerry just to share a little bit about family and what she can share about that a little bit and how she can help encourage you. I know she shared a little bit toward the end there, but I know she's got more. So you have something in mind that you can start sharing now, Jer?
Okay. Well, first of all, I count it a privilege that we can be praying parents. I count it a privilege that our children had praying grandparents that prayed for them on a diligent daily basis, that the Lord would use them, would protect them, would keep them safe. And as far as the blessings that God has given our family, I think prayer is the basis. We see that as being a very important part of the growth and development of ourselves as well as our children. I believe that children need to see the excitement in their parents' lives, that they love the Lord. If they can see that parents love the Lord, are enjoying it, it's just a natural thing for them to want to participate in something that someone else really is enjoying. If you walk around and say, oh, we got to go to church, blah, 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 you're going to find that your children are going to say, I don't want to go to church, because if it doesn't excite them, it sure is not going to excite us. being honest with your children, I see as a very significant thing. Don't expect them to do things that you wouldn't do yourself. So if you expect your child to attend church with you, then you best be going too. Because they live and learn by example. I think that some of the hardships that we've experienced over the last 30 years have drawn the kids closer together. We haven't been able to give them everything on a silver platter. If they've wanted something, they've had to work to get it themselves. Sometimes convenience for children is a lifetime inconvenience because they don't learn how to work for something, how to keep it, how to preserve it, how to enjoy it, how to save it. And so some of my point is, don't make life too easy for your kids. Make them work for what they get. Even if it's a matter of cleaning a toilet and you pay them for it, they've learned that they've accomplished a job, they've done a good job, and they'll be rewarded for it. Now, if you ask Emily, she'd be really upset if I'd mentioned the thought about cleaning toilets, because she is our chief housekeeper, cleaner. So if they're not clean, we know who to go to. Now, that's going to be an embarrassing thing. It probably shouldn't be on tape, but she's our cleaner. She knows that if she doesn't do it, she'll be held responsible for it. So in token of that, if you give a child a responsibility and they fail to meet the responsibility, then they have to know that there's consequences. And I think that goes along with honesty, that if you teach your children from a young age that if they disobey, they will reap consequences. And if they obey, the consequence will be good. And if they disobey, the consequence could and probably would, in our household, include a paddle on the butt. People have different views of spanking kids, but it's my feelings that if you read the book of Proverbs, it says, train up a child and spare the rod, spoil the child. Those are all different scripture verses that you find in the book of Proverbs. But the consistency of discipline is a significant thing to consider also, that if a child does something wrong, discipline them then. Don't wait several hours to do it, because by that time the child will more than likely forget what they've done and they won't understand what the purpose of the discipline is. So consistent, right on, at the time discipline is something that we used when our children were younger. We prayed that when we would discipline our children in that respect with a paddle and with talking and understanding, that when they got older, that type of discipline could be transferred over to that they would get that from the Lord. So we really believe that the early on discipline that we taught our children was something that they could use as they aged, so that they would be able to trust the Lord for their decision-making processes. This might not be what you're wanting, but that's what you got.
Okay. That sounds really good. You mentioned earlier, while we were talking, this was off camera, I had asked a question about why, if your children didn't rebel when you were bringing them up about church and, God and living that way, why did your husband rebel in his early life? Do you want to share about that a little?
There's two unique differences between the way my husband was brought up and the way our children are brought up. His father was the pastor. He had to be there when the door opened, when the door closed. And out of responsibility to his job, his career, he felt that his children had to be there as much as he had to do it. What my husband, I believe, saw in the church back when he was a child was a job that was stealing his father from him. The church came first, the family came second. And no child likes to be made second fiddle. It's not to say that the church and his father's job were not important, but his father, out of obligation to his job, had a tendency to neglect his children as far as spending time with them, activities during the week that normally a father would have time to do, but because of the church and the job there, he didn't not have time for it. Now, the difference that I think in my children is that they saw mom and dad wanting to go to church and enjoying it. And it's a much more desirable thing to go and participate in something that you see your family members enjoying. So the difference was that they went with the attitude, Mom and Dad are enjoying this. This is probably pretty good. And we could go as a family, and the church activities, the church roles, the church obligations that his father had to meet, that didn't exist in our house because we went as a family to worship God. We didn't have the conflicts of job activities as opposed to family.
That makes a whole big difference, doesn't it? I mean, if you're being shown a way, let's say your parents are showing a way that if they're not happy doing what they're doing, how can they expect their children to be happy? And so I guess I'd like to say maybe to some of you out there listening, if you're not happy in your church life, let's say you are going to church and you are doing what you know to do, but it's becoming more ritual for you, and it's not a joy in your life or in your heart. And if you have children that you're trying to raise at the same time, those children are going to pick up on that. And you have a responsibility to seek God about that. Don't you think so, Jerry?
Definitely.
I mean, if they're unhappy, they need to be seeking God about, what is it, God? Is there more here that I'm not getting or something? Do you want to share a little bit about that? You got something on that?
I guess part of a song comes to mind, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And if you don't have the joy, you won't have strength. And if you want your children to be happy, they're going to have to see the joy in your life. And basically this boils down to your relationship with Jesus Christ. Maybe a self-re-examination of your relationship with Him would be appropriate at that time, so that you can evaluate where you are at with the Lord and any changes that He might want to make in your life, so you can be more effective in the ministry to your children and to the people that you're with on a daily basis.
Amen. That is the important point she just made. It's what it boils down to is your relationship, your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're not happy in the church you're in with your life, serving, you're doing things because you've been taught to do it that way. You're doing things out of, let's say, tradition, and you don't have that joy or that excitement in your heart for God. That's tradition, and you need to seek Him about that personal relationship. There's more to Christianity than just going through the motions. It's that personal, heartfelt relationship that you're missing. I would like to now move on to another area here where I think is really interesting. It's regarding family again. And from knowing, Jerry didn't share any of this on her tape or her part of the video, or Al did not share it either, but through our knowing them, because of the church that we're in together with them, and we have come together for prayer meetings and different types of fellowship, so we've gotten to know them as a family and gotten to know, some of their ways and what they believe and how they believe, what Al believes about his responsibility as a father. And I'd like to ask Jerry if she'd share a little bit about that, because it is so good. It is so good. I have never seen a father take such responsibility for his daughters that I see with this man. So Jerry, would you share about that and why Al feels that way, and just share in detail what he believes and why he believes it, and how your daughters even accept it because they know it's right.
Well, I think the basis for all this is that we as parents believe that our children are a heritage from the Lord. And when you receive such an important gift from the Lord, you realize how much responsibility He places on your shoulders to care for something that He gave you to take care of. So I think from day one, the girls realized how important they were to us. It started out with dates with Dad. You know, every month or so he'd take one out on a special date. So they knew that they were special in their dad's eyes, in God's eyes. So that set a foundation for the girls to realize that Dad had their best interest at heart. We set out to avoid the word date and to use the word court as opposed to the dating word, because the courting would mean that the relationship you're developing is for keeps. We had talked about a lot of this stuff with the kids, and before Aaron was married, we had a Bible study here, and young couples came as well as young singles. And my husband had just let this one guy have it because he was really abusing his wife and his child, physically, emotionally, financially. He was just ignoring him. So Al just let him have it. Well, then Raul comes in the picture, said, "Mr. Walma, could I talk with you?" He goes, "Yeah, what about?" "Well, I'd like to court your daughter." "What do you mean, court, like married?" Goes, "Yeah." So that was one time where we realized that our son-in-law has much more strength than we ever thought, because he heard what my husband had talked with this other gentleman with, and he still had the nerve to ask him if he could court his daughter. So that was the first sign of strength that we really saw in our now son-in-law, because he was brave enough to ask that question. The girls actually see this as a convenient out, because if some gentleman comes around and wants to spend time with them and they really don't seem to like the gentleman, they say, "Dad, forget it. Just take care of him for us, would you?" So they see their father as a bodyguard to protect them from difficult situations. The fact that the young men have to come and talk to my husband is based on the fact that he feels it's his responsibility to take care of those girls. And so they have to come and speak with him, identify their goals, their orientations, where they're planning to go, when they're going to be back, so that he knows exactly when and where they're going to be. And in the little conversation that he has with these gentlemen, he will say, "You know, God gave me the responsibility to care for these young ladies, and now that you're taking them out of my house, I'm going to personally hold you responsible, and if anything happens to them, I'll come find you." And it either scares them away or they stay. So for the gentlemen who have been brave enough to come and ask questions, I really commend them for their bravery. The main reason for doing that is that God imparted upon both of us a responsibility to take care of the kids and to help them mature and to be the women that God would have them to be. And so that's probably the main reason why we take the active role in checking to see who they're going to be with and to maintain their safety. I'm not sure that that's exactly what Al would share, but that, from my point of view, it's a God-given responsibility to take an active role in the children's lives. And the difficulty with that is that you who have teenage children may not be able to start something like that right now, because we're of the situation where we started that almost from the time they were born. So if you have teenage children, this might not be the time to just say, "Well, guys, we're going to take control of who you go out with and what you're going to do, and they're going to have to come and ask us first," because I can assure you that that will create some rebellion in the teenage kids. So before you attempt to do that, it would be good to study the Word and see what God has as far as what He would have you to do with your children, to speak the truth in love so that they can hear it and accept it and see that this is what the Lord would have for them too.
That is so precious, what she just shared. Because even though, let's say, even though your children are grown now and you have just come into this new life of, living a Christian life, God is so faithful. He is so faithful to make things right and to help you do what needs to be done at the time, where you're at. He meets you right where you're at, right at the moment. That's what's so precious about the Holy Spirit. He's there. He's our comforter. He's our helper. And He knows exactly what we need when we need it. And when I listen to what she just shared about her children and how they taught them from ground up, it makes me think, wow, I wish that I could have had that when I was growing up. But I didn't, because my father died when I was 6 years old, and then my mother remarried when I was 10 years old. But even though my parents were in the Christian world, I mean, they were in the church doing what they knew to do, but as we shared earlier, there wasn't that joy and that excitement in their lives. So we as children didn't see that. I'm the last of 7 children, and we didn't see that growing up. We didn't see that excitement. We did things out of habit, tradition and habit. We prayed before our meals. We went to church every Sunday and Sunday school and on Wednesdays and things like that. But when it came down to living life and the nitty-gritty of dealing with things, we didn't have that encouragement that we needed from a father. Our father knew nothing about how to take his role as a godly man in the household and to be responsible for his daughters. I'm the 6th daughter. We have 1 brother and 6 girls. And my father did not know. He did not know how to take his role to protect his daughters and to teach them and to help them grow into the godly women that they could have been, should have been, But it was only by His grace that we are all now where we are today. Because, we all went through our times of struggle and trouble in our lives that we got ourselves into, but it was only because we didn't know how to resist things that came our way, men, and bad marriages. This is my first marriage, and I am so thankful and so grateful that I was spared a lot of that heartache that my sisters had to go through. A lot of them went through 1, 2, 3 divorces, and I was the last one, and I was even the last one, or should I say the first one of the whole family that God got a hold of and changed my life so drastically that they saw a real change. And I want to say I'm just so grateful and so thankful that He kept me. He kept me through those years, because I could have gotten in trouble. I could have ended up like they did, having to get married and ending up with a marriage that didn't work, But He kept me. And at the age of 26, that's when He finally got my attention 100% on Him. And then, I had a few years to grow spiritually in Him, in the Word of God, and just building my relationship with Him. And that's when I met my husband now. So I am just so thankful and grateful that God He does keep you when, let's say, you aren't in a situation where you were taught how to be godly, how to live a godly life as a young woman. He does see where you're at, and he does forgive you when you come to him, and when you just totally repent. Ask him to forgive you for your past, and let him give you a new start, a whole new life, and you will be surprised at what he will do for you. Old things are passed away, and all things become new after you totally turn your life over to him. And that's what this broadcast is meant to do, to help you, encourage you to do just that. And that's what I would like you to do. If you find yourself in a situation where you are so sorry for the way your life has gone, and you wish you could go back and do it all over again, you don't have to go back and do it all over. You can just say, God, I'm sorry. Please help me. Help me to make my life right. I can't do it without you. I've done it long enough without you. And now I want you to take control and help me. And he will. He will do it. I challenge you to go to him and ask him, because he's there. He's waiting. If you haven't done that, he's waiting. And he won't let you go. He won't let you alone. If you're watching this and you've watched this long, he's got his hand on your life, and he's watching. And there'll come a time, if you won't do it now, there'll come a time where he will get your attention. And I pray that it won't be a death situation or something like that where you have to cry out. You can do it now. You don't have to do it when you're hurting and so broken and so low. So just give him a try. You've given everything else a try in your life. You've tried to do it all yourself, and you've seen it hasn't worked. Give Jesus. Jesus wants to be the Lord of your life. And I thank you. I thank you for listening to me. And I pray that you will let him change you. He will do it. Thank you, and God bless you.